Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Film for Fans podcast, the podcast from movie fans for movie fans. I am your host, Ryan Dunlevy. That is not my normal co-host, Rob Dunham. That
Hello.
is guest host extraordinaire, Steve Glerum.
Hi, everybody.
Yes, those of you who are dedicated Film for Fans listeners will recognize Steve. Steve has been on the podcast a number of times, either doing his Superman breakdowns or joining us on Instant Reaction podcast. So it is awesome to have Steve with us again this week.
I'm jazzed to be on the show.
Excellent, excellent. So we've got a great show in store for you. We will, of course, talk about the box office, how the results of last week's movies, and what's coming up this weekend. On top of which, our discussion for this day, we did a series of these last year. We're going to do a series of these again this year, is anniversary movies, ranking movies that turn a specific anniversary. So we'll start out this year with movies turning 10. And yes, that means 2015. It feels like it should be 2005, but no, it is 2015 was 10 years ago. Oof.
What I realized last time I co-hosted with you, it was the 2014 movies. So I guess it's been about a year since I was doing this with you, but yeah.
That's crazy.
So,
nice. Okay. So we'll talk about that, and we'll end the podcast with our watch list, movies we've watched over the last couple weeks. So now we'll get started with a little bit of our box office update. So Snow White took home the number one spot in the box office. However, it only did between 43 and 44 million dollars. So that was not a great number given the budget of over $250 million that this movie pulled in. We will cover that a little bit more in a second. Second, we came in Black Bag in its second week in the box office, did $4.4 million. That was about a 42% drop, which is pretty good from week one to week two. Of course, it didn't make a ton of money in week one, but it has a 2-week total of 14.8 million. Captain America Brave New World in its sixth week in the box office did 4.1 million. Mickey 17 in its third week did $3.9 million. The total for 3 weeks there is $40 million. And rounding out the top five was another movie, Novocaine, in its second week. It did $3.7 million. That's a 57% drop. So that's about on average from week one to week two for Novocaine. It has a 2-week total of $15.7 million. Anything of note for you amongst these movies?
I mean, how many weeks has Mickey 17 been out?
3 weeks.
3 weeks. Okay. I kind of expected that to be making more money.
Yeah.
I don't know. So
the problem was, like, I think people realized it was just a disappointing movie. Like, it had so much hype and there was so much promo for it. I think people realized that it wasn't particularly good, and that has really tanked its sales.
Gotcha. And that one, I thought it was well advertised. Like, I actually was a little interested in seeing it, which I wouldn't normally be, but I think they kind of advertised it well.
Yeah, it probably didn't make its advertising budget back, which is sad.
Yeah, I'm proud of myself. I've actually seen one of those movies.
Yeah.
For somebody who hardly ever gets to the theater anymore. I did watch Captain America Brave New World. Have you watched it yet?
I still haven't. It's been one of those, I've gone to the theater a couple times, but I was like, oh, I kind of feel like watching this other one more.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's not like you got to go see it or you got to see it now or anything like that. Like, we watched it not expecting it to be good. And it was, it was all right. It was meh. But I guess we can't really talk about it since you haven't seen
it. But if you want to talk about it a little bit, you can do it on when we do our watch list. Okay. But that's up to you.
Sounds good.
Yeah, the key thing here is, like, the movies that came out last week did reasonably well in their week twos, but they're still not. Nobody's going to see them, and they're just not. They're not kicking out huge amount of money. It's just been a rough couple of weeks at the box office for the theaters because there's just not been a lot that people really want to go see.
Yeah.
And the only one that made even close to 100 million and made almost 200 was Captain America, and that's been out for 6 weeks now. So it's hanging on just because there's nothing else that anybody is really super jacked up to see.
I remember you saying like you were kind of interested in Novocaine.
Mm-hmm.
Um, has that done, how has that done? Like, did it do better or worse than you thought it would do?
I would say maybe slightly worse, but it's not. It's in the realm of what I thought it might do. It wasn't a high profile movie. It didn't have a high
Mm.
budget. It did not have a particularly big name actor associated with it. Um, I'm still intrigued to see it. I might actually try to see it at some point here in the next week or so. But at this point, I think it's in its normal range of possibilities of what it could have and probably should have made. You know, that's what I would say.
Okay. Should we
But
talk
we
about the
have
dwarf elephant in the room about with Snow White?
yes.
Or
So Snow White is kind of a little bit of a disaster here. Um, just to give some context, at 44 million at the domestic box, it marks the worst opening for a Disney live action remake to date. It carried a $250 million production budget. It is not going to come close to making that back domestically. It might cross the finish line if you add in like the international ones along that lines. Um, but there's a lot of things that went into this. It had to be reshot a number of times and a number of changes made to it through its production schedule because um, things were not going well with some of the things they were putting out about this movie. On top of which, Rachel Zelger has not done the movie any favors with some of her online commentaries. In fact, the I think it was the director's son made some publicized comments that her foray into politics online really hurt the movie, and he called her basically selfish for feeling the need to get her stuff out there as opposed to thinking about everybody else who was involved in the production and worked on the movie. Now, I don't know how much you can say for it. The reviews are not pretty for this one. Just a few quotes here. The Independent called it lazy and visually repellent, exhaustingly awful from The Guardian, a strange hot mess from Huffington Post, good enough, dot, 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 for TV, Vanity Fair. So,
ouch.
it's not doing well. And I gotta say, kind of everyone saw it coming.
Yeah. They tried to avoid it too. They tried to save it and just didn't happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's beyond saving, I guess.
Um, I wonder who's going to take the brunt of this. I wonder if it's going to hurt Rachel Zelger's career more or if it hurts Disney more. You know, I mean, I think Disney has started to realize they need to make some changes. We'll see how far they go with that. But I
Yeah.
wonder if this is going to have a deleterious effect on Zelger's career, given the fact that this is not the first movie she's kind of like had issues with.
Was a West Side Story one of those?
Oh, I can't remember. There was another
Okay.
one involved there. And she is actually a talented actress. Like if you've seen her in something, she has a great voice. She can sing. She's not a bad actress. She really just can't get out of her own way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting watching Disney trying to like after they've kind of they've been hurt so much by the I don't know, the counter cancel culture kind of thing that's going on the last few years, and they're trying to not like lose fans as a result of their own stuff, but now they're kind of the woke stuff kind of got them a different way this time. It's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what comes of future Disney live action remakes and if they're going to change course on any of this because yeah, Snow White did not do them any favors, that's for sure. All
I
right, well, let's
personally haven't been a
go ahead.
huge fan. Oh, sorry.
Okay,
The
go ahead.
live action remakes, I've never been that impressed with personally. I feel like they're too much and not enough like the originals. It's like they don't make it fresh enough, but they also like because it feels like they're just doing the same thing, just live action.
Mhm.
But then it's also not, in some way, not quite hitting the right note for me
Yeah.
as someone who really loved the old, classics. I mean, who didn't love the classics?
Yeah. I mean, I think the one I can remember, I might have seen some of the other ones, but the one I can remember was the Aladdin one. And parts of it were pretty decent, but like the stuff they added was like, okay, this doesn't make sense with the rest of the story. Like you're literally just
Right.
countering the rest of the story by what you included in here. And
Yeah.
yeah, so yeah, I've not been a particular fan of what I've seen so far on the live action remakes.
I mean, how many more Disney classics do they have they haven't made yet?
Well, and I think it's like there's part of it, it's like, okay, people love the story and they know they have a fan base going in. But I think another part of it's like it's kind of fitting with the era of like nobody's coming up with anything new. So let's just figure out how to repackage what we already have that people love.
Yeah. And I think with Disney, I remember when maybe the 90s when they started doing
Mm,
sequels of all the old ones, cartoon sequels, and none of those were just very good. But I feel like this is kind of like this is them trying to just capitalize on something that
yeah.
was great originally.
Mhm.
But then there's other stuff like the Pixar stuff, like we're going to be talking about Inside Out, with this thing, and Inside Out 2 came out, and like some of those sequels have been good.
Yeah,
So just interesting.
it is. It is. All right. Well, let's move on to what's coming out this weekend. There are four movies, and we'll go through them fairly quickly. None of them are like high level releases. The first one, we've got a couple of we got a couple of semi horror movies and an action and kind of a feel good story. The first one, Woman in the Yard, rated R, an hour and 28 minutes. A mysterious woman repeatedly appears in a family's front yard, often delivering chilling warnings and unsettling messages, leaving them to question her identity, motives, and the potential danger she might pose. So, Woman in the Yard. The next one is Death of a Unicorn, rated R, 144 in runtime. Father daughter duo Elliot and Ridley hit a unicorn with their car and bring it to a wilderness retreat of a mega wealthy pharmaceutical CEO. This is Paul Rudd and Jenna Ortega. And this is kind of like one of the A24 specials where it's kind of a weird mashup of like horror, dark comedy, and drama. Um, Third, The Penguin Lessons, PG-13, 1 hour, 50 minutes. Starring Oscar nominee Steve Coogan. This poignant dramedy from director Peter Cataneo follows an Englishman's personal and political awakening after he adopts a penguin during a cataclysmic period in Argentine history. And finally, A Working Man, rated R, 1 hour and 33 minutes. Levon Cade left his profession behind to work construction to be a good dad to his daughter. But when a local girl vanishes, he is asked to return to the skills that made him a mythic figure in the shadowy world of counterterrorism. This is, of course, a Jason Statham movie.
Is
So
it a sequel to The Beekeeper?
I don't think it's a sequel to The Beekeeper, but maybe.
Somebody told me it was, and I don't believe them, but I just had to ask.
I didn't see that in the write-ups I saw, but I guess it's possible. I mean,
I mean, they haven't stated it. You would think they would point that out if it was an actual sequel. But
yeah, yeah, I
okay.
can do a quick.
Just wondering.
So, of all of these movies, do any of them interest you, and which one would you go see?
I can't say that I am interested in any of them. Uh, I wouldn't go see any of them in the theater. If I'm streaming, I'd probably most likely watch A Working Man.
Yeah, I, every once in a while, you just get in the mood for a Jason Statham action movie, and
Yeah.
so Working Man seems to be well within that fit, and so I could
Hmm.
be persuaded to go see that one. There's some intrigue around Death of a Unicorn for me because I've seen the trailers a couple times. Um, A24 movies just tend to be so odd that sometimes they're just they're too much at times.
Yeah.
And I think there's a real risk that this one would be along those lines.
The, yeah. The Penguin Lessons, I saw the trailer for it. I was like, it could be good. It could be like I mean, Mr. Holland's Opus kind of
Mm-hmm.
movie. I mean, probably not to that level,
Mm-hmm.
but it also looked like it could be a very forgettable movie too. So
Yeah.
I think I would want to see how people react to it before I just watch it, I think.
Yeah. Yep. Well, that is what's coming out in the box office this weekend. And now we shall turn to our discussion, the main event, if you will, for the evening, ranking the movies turning 10 years old this year. And so we will be looking at movies from 2015. And I got to say, man, looking back on these, there was a lot of good movies in
It was
2015.
a good year.
It was a
Yeah.
good year. And we'll get to this when we talk about our ratings, but like many of the movies that we're going to talk about are movies I still watch on a regular basis. I think
Yeah.
almost all of the ones that are on my top 10 list, I've probably seen in the last year and a half. I've rewatched in the last year and a half, some multiple times. It's just, and there's a number of movies on this list that would be on my list of like my all time, like top 50 would be on here. So just such a
Wow.
fantastic year.
Yeah.
But just to give you a few stats at the top of this before we get into our specific ones, the top grossing movies of 2015. Number one was Star Wars: A Force Awakens. That was the final the what is that, the sequel
That
trilogy,
was
the first one of
that
the
was the
sequel.
seventh, the
Yes,
first of the sequel trilogy. Yeah.
yes. The Force Awakens did 936 million at the box office. Um, Number two was Jurassic World, the first of that kind of relaunch, 652 million. We have Avengers: The Age of Ultron did 459 million. Inside Out did 356 million, and Furious 7 did 353 million. So lots of like franchises. The only non-franchise in the top five was Inside Out, but of course that is semi-franchise because Pixar's brand was still very, very strong at that time,
Right.
and people went because it was Pixar. Mm. Now, just to give you a clue about the Oscars, the best picture for that year in the 2016 Oscars went to Spotlight. That one won Best Picture. Alejandro Iñárritu won Best Director for The Revenant. The Best Actor went to Leonardo DiCaprio for The Revenant. Best Actress went to Brie Larson for Room. Best Supporting Actor went to Mark Rylance for Bridge of Spies. And the Best Supporting Actress went to Alicia Vikander for The Danish Girl. Um, so both Steve and I made lists of the what we thought were the 10 best movies. And before we get into it, this was fascinating to me. This was, I think, the first year I actually wrote out a top 10 list for movies. This is the first time I started doing that list. So it's
Nice.
weird to look back at the list I made at the time of what the best movies were and to reevaluate, like to reimagine that list 10 years later as to if I feel differently about which movies should be where given the 10 years of history. So that's kind
Yeah.
of fun. I'm actually going to write an article for the Film for Fans website about that, like revisiting those from 10 years ago. So I look forward to, and since I've been doing them ever since, I got pieces for this coming every year now. But do you have any thoughts on off the top about 2015 year in movies?
Yeah, I was shocked how many good movies there were. Like it was like glory days. Like it's just good stuff. There was so many movies. It kind of hit me as I was going through the list of like top 50, top 100. It was like there are a lot of movies that I never saw that I should have.
Mm,
Like a lot of movies. Um, I kind of even wrote those down.
yeah.
So don't judge me, but I'm just gonna go through them quick. Some
Sure.
of these might be on your list, but The Walk,
Mm,
The Big Short,
mm-hmm,
Steve Jobs,
mm-hmm,
Sicario,
mm-hmm,
Kingsman, Secret
mm-hmm,
Service, Furious 7, Star Wars: The Force Awakens, Bridge of Spies, and Spotlight.
So these are all
So
ones you
that's
have not seen.
I have not seen those
Okay.
movies.
So we are gonna have to like get together and spend like an entire weekend watching all of the movies that Steve has not seen that he should have seen from 2015.
It would take a full weekend to see them all. Yeah.
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 Interesting. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, there were a number, I didn't write them down. There were a number of like, oh, okay, yeah, that one. Um, but I will give you a couple of honorable mentions that I did not include on my top 10 list. McFarland was a really good movie about a guy who takes over a track team. Everest
That is
was
one of
that year.
mine.
What?
McFarlane is one of my honorable mentions as well.
Okay. Everest was on there. It was a movie done about the 1996 Everest disaster. Believe it or not, The Revenant is on my list of honorable mentions.
Really?
Yes. That's
Wow.
how loaded the year is. That the best picture of this year. And I will and is it on your list, by the way? You don't have to tell me where. Is it on your list?
It is on my list. Yeah.
Okay. So when we get there, I'll talk to you about why it's in my honorable mentions and not my top 10.
Okay.
Kingsman is in my honorable mentions. And then the ones who that were in my top 10 at the time that I have dropped out of the top 10 were Inside Out, Star Wars, and Jurassic World.
Interesting. I'm
Yes.
so curious what's
Yeah.
going to be in your list.
Yeah. 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 All right. So let's start with our top 10. Let's do it in pairs. Since you did yours in pairs, right? If I understand that
Yep,
correctly.
I
So give
did.
me 10 and 9.
All right. So 10 is Creed.
Mm,
Um, and 9 is Jurassic World.
okay.
I felt like both of those were good, like, sequel remakes, reviving old classic, like breathing new life
Yeah.
into old like things, but also continuing the story really well.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. Creed, I did think was a pretty good movie. It's not on my list just because for whatever reason, I've never been a fan of Michael B. Jordan, like as an actor. I don't love him, but it was a good movie. It really was. Um, as far as Jurassic World, it was originally in my top 10. And I think the thing I liked about it most was you finally got to see what a functioning, working Jurassic Park would look like.
True.
Because in any of the other movies, you never got to see what it actually looked like and what a
Yeah.
actual park. And so for the first part of the movie, you get to see that. You get to experience what an actual Jurassic Park would look like. And I thought that was kind of cool. But I don't
Yeah.
think that was enough given the sheer amount of great movies that came out that year. It wasn't quite enough to bump it over the hump for me to keep it in the top 10.
And I will say, like, I'm not saying my list is the best movies of the year. I'm
Yeah.
just saying kind of the ones that were for me, either the
Yes.
most enjoyable or the ones that stuck out to me the most for different
And
reasons.
and that is absolutely a valid way to do this because when we come up to the top of my list, I'm going to tell you there's one where I made a call where I went with enjoyability over what's probably a slightly better film.
Yeah.
And so that's part of the equation is like ones that stick out to you, ones that you remember, ones that you enjoy for sure.
Mhm.
All right. For me, my 10 was The Big Short. The Big Short was 10 for me. This was originally on my honorable mentions. Um, it did it did very well, and it was a pretty good movie with a pretty good cast. The one reason why, like, despite the fact that it was so good that it sticks down at number 10 is because like it left off like the other half of the story about what caused this. Like it just ignored the whole government role in it and just went focused on
Oh,
the other things. So that always has bothered me about the movie. So
interesting.
yeah, like it's like, oh, the government was telling them they had to do this. We don't need that in the story. But it is well acted and it is a fascinating. It is some of that is very very fascinating to see how some of the inner workings of how that stuff collapsed. But yeah, The Big Short rounded out to number 10 for me. Number 9 was The Walk. This was one of the ones you stated you hadn't seen. This was one of the ones I was most excited about. I went to see this in theaters, and this thing was like, it was so fun to watch in theaters because like him walking around, just casually walking around on the edge of the Twin Towers. It's such a good movie. It's such a great story. It almost plays out like a heist film because they're trying to surreptitiously figure out how they're going to sneak into the building and do this. And so it's
Okay.
really, really enjoyable, really entertaining, and visually stunning. Like you get some awesome things, which is why I had to see it in theaters because I needed that scale. But even without the scale, it really plays up and plays well. Like if you're afraid of heights, it can get to you a little bit. But it is a really fun movie.
Nice.
All right. Eight.
It's my turn.
Yep, your turn.
All right. Eight is Ant-Man,
Okay. Mhm.
and seven is Avengers: Age of Ultron. I
Okay.
feel like those two went together.
Mhm.
Uh, Ant-Man being that it was kind of like one of the it was during that era of the Marvel movies, and they could put out these movies, and you're like, how is this going to be a good movie? And it just would be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Like they did it right. I felt
Mhm.
like. Um, Avengers: Age of Ultron. I feel like it's the weakest of the Avengers movies. It's kind of forgettable, but it's got good moments. It's like it fits well in the in the series, like the what is it, the Sokovia
Mhm.
Accords or whatever that
Yeah.
come out of that. Like it's
Mhm.
that sticks through the series, but it was okay. But it was good, but it's just not. It's kind of in the shadow of the other ones, you know.
Yeah. I think it is the one that people most often like forget. Okay, wait. What was the plot there? What was going on there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
did anything really happen? Yeah.
Like it was interesting. Like I remember enjoying it and thought it was, I mean, I thought that all the Avengers movies were reasonably good. Um, but yeah, it was I remember what's his name who played Ultron. Uh,
Yeah, I forget his name.
out on
The
his
Blacklist guy.
The Blacklist guy. Yeah. Yeah, I like him and I thought he was good. Like his voice carries that. He's got that good bad guy feel.
Yeah. Yeah, and it sets up the Civil War movie, the Captain America Civil War movie well,
Mhm. Yeah.
with that whole
It
conflict.
does feel like more of a setup movie,
Yeah.
doesn't it? Even though it's an
And that's
Avengers movie.
yeah, totally. And that's my biggest gripe about the Marvel movies is when they're using things as a setup when it should have been more focused on what it was. Like there was too many movies like Captain America, the third Captain America movie, Civil War. I felt like it was just trying to continue that story on when it should have been more about Captain America. Things like
Yeah.
that. It's
Yeah.
one of my pet peeves.
Yeah. I'm with you on that. Like I didn't like Civil War as much as many other people did. Like it's
Yeah,
continually rated as one of a lot of people's favorite ones. And it just wasn't that for me.
agreed. Your turn.
Yeah, so 8 and 7 for me are Spotlight for me, and Sicario. Now, interesting if we go back and forth to what I did 10 years ago, I had Spotlight at number 4 and Sicario as an honorable mention. So this is one of those that has moved dramatically. Both of these moved dramatically in the 10 years since it came out. Sicario has really risen for me because of the rise of Dennis Villanueva and my appreciation for him as a director. And this film, like, I just keep coming back to. In fact, I watched it last week, not even thinking about the fact that this was coming up. Um, but it's such a gut punch of a film. Like, it's amazing what they do with it and the intensity and the way they just like Emily Blunt is fantastic, starring opposite of Josh Brolin and oh now I'm blanking on his name, Benicio del Toro. I think that's right. Yeah, and just like the juxtaposition between those three characters is just fantastic, and the soundtrack is like pulsing and thumping. It's just such a good movie. It really is. So that one really has risen because I watch that regularly. It's a good movie. And Spotlight has fallen a bit for me. I still think it's a really, really good movie and well directed and well written. It's just it's more like the other movies have surpassed it for me in terms of my rewatchability, enjoyability. But Spotlight is really good. It's also like the soundtrack for Spotlight is also on my rotation of music I listen to when I play or when I work. So
Interesting.
yeah, it is a good soundtrack and it is a solid movie. Um, I just and it obviously it carried the title of Best Picture that particular year, but I think there's the other movies I think have just carried on and become more enjoyable, more rewatchable to me in the
Mhm.
meantime than Spotlight has.
Sure.
All right, 6'5". What do you got?
All right. I think this movie is going to be higher on your list.
Okay.
Probably pretty high on your list, my prediction. But Ex Machina.
Okay.
Did I say that right?
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. Close enough.
Machina, Ex Machina. So, yeah.
Yeah. Something like that.
Something like that.
And then the one above that is The Revenant.
Mm. Hmm.
I paired those together because those are movies that will stick with you.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I thought about them a long time after I watched them. I mean, they're very different movies from one another. Like
Sure.
Ex Machina is just, very philosophical. Just a very interesting subject. It's not something I'm going to keep rewatching. Um, but yeah, it's just so interesting. And The Revenant is a tough movie. Like the whole thing is just a struggle and it's like gritty, like
Brutal.
nothing else.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
what they put DiCaprio won that Oscar just because of what they put him through to film this movie.
Yes. He deserved that one more than anything else he's ever gotten. I feel like for sure.
And if you
I
remember,
have a
like
lot more respect for him now.
they didn't want to use any lighting. They wanted to film it all in natural light so that it seemed
Mm.
like what was going on. So there were times where like they would hike miles out into the jungle and have like 10 minutes to shoot a scene and then have to do the same thing the next day. It's just
Yeah.
crazy stuff.
Yeah. I feel like I have so much more respect for the frontier, like the frontiersmen, like the people who were like first here.
Yeah.
It really did affect my perception. Not that the normal frontiersman would go through everything he went through,
Yeah.
but like I have a new respect for bears from that movie. Like that movie, yeah, has even now I think about it. I'm not going to watch it again. I don't think I'm ever going to watch it again, but I do think about it from time to time. Is man,
So, and that's
it's
why it's on my honorable mentions list. It is without a doubt a great film, but it is not a film you rewatch. Like I saw
no.
it twice in theaters because like I went by myself or I went with somebody and then I went with my dad. So I saw it twice in theaters. I have not seen it since, and I really don't have a desire to like go back and rewatch it. Just it's that type of
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah, that's one of the ones that made it to my list. That and Ex Machina, that is like they're not because they're rewatchable. It's not because of it's enjoyable for me. It's just because you just have so much respect for the movie
Mm-hmm.
and what it was.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, for sure.
yeah. I just don't want to die by bear attack. That's my goal in life.
No, no, no.
Yeah.
um, You know what? I actually left out number 5 on my list and I was reordering my list. I
Oh, so you don't have a number five?
don't have a number 5. Like
Okay.
I did
So
this
top
real quick
nine.
and I was like, okay, so I don't have a number 5.
Which one of your
Instead of,
honorable mentions, makes it on the list now?
yeah, one of the honorable mentions makes it in. Um, so this one may not end up at number 5, but I'll just put Kingsman in there because I thought it was a fun spy film and a different kind of fun actiony oriented thing. It won't be at number 5 on my list, but that one that sneaks in at number 10.
Yeah.
Um, but number 6 for me was Steve Jobs. And I honestly had a very hard time not having Steve Jobs higher. Like my respect for everything above this movie and above is so high that it was incredibly difficult for me to parse these ones out. Again, Steve Jobs, another movie I watched this past week.
Hmm.
I wasn't even trying to do this, and I watched multiple movies from 2015 just because I love them that much. I am a
Cool.
huge fan of Steve Jobs. I've always been a fan of Steve Jobs, read multiple books about him and all this type of stuff. And this film just is, it is an awesome film. Um, the it is a unique take on a biopic. Aaron Sorkin's script for this is one of the best scripts I've ever encountered. It's
Wow.
so good and it's so different. There are very few movies that you watch and you're like, oh, that script was amazing. Like it's just not the way. There's other things stick
Yeah.
out. It's the action, it's the actors, it's the director, it's the cinematography. Like if you're in a movie where the script becomes a star, like either it's that bad or it's that good. And very few times is it that good. But Steve Jobs is
Yeah.
one of those movies. And that's not to say the acting and the directing were not awesome. They were. But he basically takes encompasses who Steve Jobs is by setting the entire movie takes place on three scenes backstage before one of his product launches. So a scene right before he launches the Mac, a scene right before he launches the next computer, and then one scene right before he launches the new iMac after he returns to Apple. And it's like all the characters interact with him and all this. So you learn about Steve Jobs from these behind the scene conversations he's having with all these people prior to his famous launches, product launches. It's just such a unique way to tell a story and such a and the dialogue and the script and the acting is just great. It really is a fantastic film.
Cool.
All right,
All right.
4 and 3.
So these are two paired together, and they're just because they're both enjoyable, and that's why they're as high on my list because I just enjoy them. Like they're movies I could watch anytime. You
Absolutely.
know, they're not like some of the best movies made that year or anything like that. But Mission Impossible, Rogue Nation,
Oh yeah,
just a very good Mission Impossible. I'm a big Mission Impossible fan.
absolutely.
Uh, and I the thing with this one is I get the fourth and the fifth mixed up.
Hmm.
Ghost Protocol and Rogue Nation. I guess it's the names are not specific enough to the movie that I can remember which one is which or anything like that. So it's kind of gets blurry for me between the fourth and the fifth.
Yeah.
But that's the only downside of it. Like the movie just on its own is just really good and it's a
Mhm.
lot of fun.
I think this
Um,
is probably going to end up on my list when I do this officially.
okay.
Now,
It's not on your list right now.
it's not. It should be.
Yeah.
And my
Um,
primary reason, before you get to this, my primary reason, the introduction of Rebecca Ferguson, amazing.
mm,
She is fantastic in this film in Rogue Nation, and she's such a
yeah,
good character.
she was, which is what makes the Dead Reckoning.
It's
Yeah.
still
Never mind.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, um, okay. So there's that one. And then I guess number three is The Martian with Matt Damon.
Hmm.
Also just good, solid, enjoyable movie. It's like Castaway on Mars, but it's like the his survival, like using science. Like, because it was
Yeah.
a very different movie from Castaway, but it's just like I'd watch that movie with anybody. I think it's a crowd pleaser. But it's also, yeah, it's just a good movie. Not like amazing, it's just good.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
watch it anytime.
Yeah. For sure. Uh, Number 4 for me is Ex Machina. And this is actually a slight drop. I had Ex Machina at number 3 in 2015. I put it to number 4 through no fault of his own. I love this movie. It's so good. Like it's the best of what sci-fi brings because the best sci-fi movies take you into a concept and then explore that concept and what that would look like and what are the implications of that. And so exploring that concept of AI and what AI could and could not do in the midst of human failings and human flaws, which is always kind of like the the bugaboo with AI is you almost always inevitably build in your own failings and your own flaws into the AI. So what happens when human failings and flaws get written into the machine and how does a machine interact with that? And so you get to see that through two different perspectives with Nathan, the head guy developing the AI and with the other guy who's testing it. Like you get to see that play out, and it's such a psychologically interesting film. I do watch this on a regular basis because I love that interplay and that dialogue. The one that leaped it um, is Bridge of Spies.
Mm.
Bridge of Spies was originally number 7. I bumped it up to number 3 because it is such an amazing, amazing film. One, it's based on a thing that actually happened. The acting performances between Tom Hanks and Mark Rylance are phenomenal. I ranked it number 2 when I did a list a couple years ago. I did a list of the top Cold War movies of all time, and this ended up, I think, at number 2 on my list of all-time Cold War movies. Like every time I watch this, I get more respect for how good of a film this is, and how well acted it is, and how well the story plays out. And uh, it is. It's just really, really good. So I've gained more respect for this film in the 10 years since it came out than I had at the time, which I probably had only seen it once at the time the list came out. All right. Number
All
2
right.
and number 1.
Number 2. This is not so much number 2 for me. This is just it for what the movie is. Hey Jess. It is Inside Out.
Mm.
Uh, yeah, I think it was just really well done. And it's funny, since I was pairing them together, I paired it with my number 1, which is Mad Max Fury Road. But the connection, the similarity between them is that they are very well thought out movies.
Mm.
Like there's a lot of thought put into a lot of like the detail, like they're personifying a lot of like personality things, a lot of life things, and
Mm-hmm.
they do it just in a really good way. Something that makes it's a great movie for kids, but like as an adult, you're like, okay, I'm really appreciating what all the thought they put into this. Um, but I won't talk about Mad Max yet. But yeah, that's my number 2, Inside Out. Oh, and I just saw the second one, and I thought that was a good
Mm.
continuation of that one, and I thought that was even better. I think dealing with the whole like adolescence thing is like I think they nailed a lot of like the things that you go through, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I thought that was quite the accomplishment, and it was nice them just getting back to just making good movies that aren't just trying to peddle some kind of agenda or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Inside Out was originally on my list. And the reason it's not is just simply in the 10 years since it came out, I maybe have seen it again one time, maybe. And that's just for me, it's just not a movie I carried forward continuing to watch. And so,
Yeah.
despite the fact that it really was like what they were able to accomplish, personifying different parts, different emotions, and different parts of the personality, and making that work is incredible.
Yeah.
And if you've ever
Mhm.
read Ed Catmull's book on the history of Pixar, there's a little section in there where he talks about like the original idea for the film and like how some of the iterations it went through and how hard they had to work on to make that work. It's an incredibly inventive, original, unique concept. And it really at the time did represent what Pixar could achieve and how good Pixar was at doing what they did in such a unique way. All right. Number 2 for me, and I flip flop these. Number 1 and number 2 were the same 1 and 2 from 2015, but I flip flop the order.
Okay.
So this time around, I have Mad Max Fury Road at number 2,
Okay.
and I have The Martian at number 1.
Ah,
And
nice.
I I really debated about this long and hard on this one. I think objectively, based on what it accomplished, Mad Max Fury Road is the better movie in terms of it's one of the best action movies of all time. The cinematography is amazing. The way it did it is so, so, so good. I switched the order because The Martian is one of the unique films that you can show to absolutely anybody and everybody likes it.
Exactly.
Everybody likes it. Like there's nothing to dislike about this movie. And it really is an incredible accomplishment. It gets very technically scientific, which is really
Mhm.
cool and appeals to the sci-fi nerds. But the humor and the humanity and the personability of all the characters and how likable the character
Yeah.
is amazing. And so everybody enjoys it. It's a fun film, but it's technically like the shots of Mars are incredible. And the
Hmm.
way they make you do feel like you are on Mars with him. You do. And
True.
that's such a cool thing. And not all the other movies that have been set on Mars have really been able to do that in that way. And it's
Yeah.
really it's just fantastic, and it's so easy to like the movie, and so that makes it incredibly rewatchable. Of all the movies on this list, I would say I probably rewatched The Martian the most. Steve Jobs maybe up there, but it's probably been The Martian. Anytime like it's on, I just have to stop and watch a few minutes of it if it's on TV or anything. It's that good.
Yeah. I agree that it's the most rewatchable one on my list.
Yeah,
And it's like, and I guess I'm gonna say a really dumb comment, but it's like if they didn't do any of those pieces right, it would not be what it is. Like
correct.
if Matt like if somebody didn't act as the main person well, it just would have fallen flat. It wouldn't be it everything came together well.
Yeah.
Um yeah, it's just I think yeah, I would watch it right now. It's like
Yeah.
what I think it's would you say it's a pretty underrated movie?
I I would. I think it's underrated in that people tend to underestimate movies that are crowd pleasers. They
Hmm.
There's a tendency to think that crowd pleaser movies can't be good. But I think this is certainly a crowd pleaser movie that is very good. And the only reason it is a crowd pleaser is because it is really good. And it's
Yeah.
not something else. It's not like, hey,
Yeah.
here's another one we're slapping a Disney label or slapping a Marvel label on it, and everyone will come see it because that's what they do. It's not that.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, and it's interesting, like Mad Max being number one on my list is not because it's my favorite movie out of the 10, but it's just like for what it is. All the thought put into it. I was shocked that it did so well at the Oscars. Like the fact that they appreciated a movie like that.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if this is a good contrast, but just like Dune 2
Mm-hmm.
not doing all that great at the Oscars, like you would think like they're creating the similarities between those two movies. I feel like they're creating this vast world. They put so much detail and thought into
Yeah.
everything, every aspect, and really takes you into this immersive world. Like I just feel like they appreciated it, seems like with Mad Max. They understood it for the masterpiece that it was, where they didn't seem I mean, I don't know if maybe
It's
I don't think Doom 2 got crowded out by other things. It was just kind of like I think it was a different they could appreciate things like that back then.
The Academy has changed enough in the last 10 years that they're no longer willing to recognize that stuff. And they have their own agendas and they have their own things they're trying to do. And so, yeah, I don't think I think if you reverse them, say Dune 2 came out in 2015 and Mad Max Fury Road came out in 2025, I think they'd have very similar performances to what the other film had. And I just think
Definitely.
that's
I
just the way the Academy is right now.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But like if you remember, like, because I think we saw it together because that was like I think we went to see Mad Max for my bachelorette. Geez.
Oh.
Wow.
Oh, I thought we were going to talk about that.
Jeez, my
Okay.
bachelor party. Oh. But like it's just like the movie just punches you in the face with sound and color
Yeah.
and action. And like the guy hanging off of the cord playing the guitar as they're float, like it's
Yeah.
just like it's so cool. And
It's
so
over
yeah,
the top, but they pull it off.
yeah.
Like,
And
and it's
does
not,
feel
again,
like an hour
it's
and a
not an
half long
enjoyable
car
world.
chase.
What's that?
It's like an hour and a half long car chase, and it's awesome.
Yeah. Yep.
So yeah, that's great. All right, so that is the revisiting the 10-year-old movies of 2015. So that's incredible. Be looking on filmforfans.com in the next couple of weeks. Do you got anything else before we close this segment out?
There were two honorable mentions,
Okay.
since you didn't ask me what mine were, that I thought that you would bring up, maybe
Okay.
in your top 10 or something. I mean, I'm not too surprised. I mean, The Man from Uncle, I
Mm,
didn't know if that would be something that you would mention. But Spectre, I'm surprised there was a James Bond movie that came out that year and you didn't put it anywhere.
I found Spectre to be very disappointing.
Mhm.
Coming, not that I think it's a terrible movie, but coming off of how amazing the previous
Skyfall.
one was, Skyfall.
Yeah,
Skyfall is incredible. Skyfall is one of
true.
the, I mean, not just for a Bond movie, it is one of the best movies. It's on my list of best all time movies. Skyfall is incredible. So they set this
Yeah.
incredibly high standard, and then Spectre just hit like a dud. Now,
Mhm.
what I like about it in retrospect is some of the stuff they launched in Spectre was redeemed in the later movies. And so
Yeah.
that makes Spectre less good. But it's more like it's not that Spectre is terrible. It's just it was like they had set the bar so high with Skyfall and they weren't able to come close to
Yeah.
reaching it with Spectre. So
Yeah, I
that's
get
why it's
that.
always kind of felt like just a level of disappointment for me.
And I feel like that's a general consensus for James Bond fans.
Yeah. They can
I
be
mean, I'm personally not a huge James Bond fan, but Skyfall is such an amazing movie.
it is. It
No
is.
question.
Yeah. All right, we'll close out today with our watch list movies we've watched over the last week or so. So Steve, you go first. What do you want to highlight for us?
Well, you and Rob inspired me to watch Crimson Tide again.
Oh, nice.
Talking about Gene Hackman. Yeah.
Yes.
Introduced my wife to it. Yeah, I mean, I've actually been I was kind of in the mood to watch it here and there, but just never, but I was like, after you guys were talking about it, and I mean, I don't need to add anything to your discussion. I think you nailed everything that's great about that movie. Um, but yeah, I mean, yeah, Gene Hackman, like he is like, I've been thinking about, him and everything, like in all the different roles. He's just such the natural person to be in that role. Whatever he's so many different roles, but he's always just natural in that role. It just always fits. Like he was just such a good actor in that way. Like I grew up with the Superman movies, so I knew him as Lex Luthor
Yeah.
originally, but then like seeing him like yeah. So but that is one of those that really sticks out. I think most movies he was kind of like he was either the villain or like the the co like the supporting actor a lot of times. Like there's
Mhm.
only a few that I could think of where he was like the main guy, like Hoosiers. I've
Mhm.
never seen The French Connection, but I really need to.
Yeah.
But he did great as the main guy, but he also I feel like most of the time he was that the antagonist or the secondary supporting character. But yeah, he was always amazing.
Yeah.
Um, so you and Rob said that you would update people as like information came out about that. I don't know.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you're
We
going to do
mentioned
that.
it. I don't remember if we mentioned it on the podcast or not. But in case we didn't, basically it was a really sad story where his it seems like his wife passed away from a virus, and then the Gene Hackman, because he kind of had dementia, then there was nobody there to take care of him, and he wasn't able to take care of himself, and then he ended up dying as a result of lack of care.
Yeah.
And that's it's just kind of a really tragic, sad story, and yeah, not great.
Yeah. Sorry, we should have saved that for the very end of the podcast, just to end on that note. But um, I don't know. I'll bring it back up to a happy note. I don't know if I will now have a better time not confusing Gene Hackman with Hugh Jackman. That I'm always saying the wrong one, but I feel like that's going to be forever for me. That's never going to change.
There's
Um,
it's like there are certain actresses or actors that I never remember their name despite how many times I've like looked it up and like them, and yeah, it's one of those
yep.
things.
All right, so
Um
Crimson Tide. Let's hear
Excellent.
it. You want to do one?
Yeah, do you have another one?
I got to see Twisters finally,
Okay.
and I really enjoyed it. But I feel like I have you to thank for that
Mm,
because you had warned me appropriately about the country music.
yeah.
So since I knew that going into it, it's like sometimes people warn you and it sets you up to actually be able to enjoy the movie better because you're not like your hopes, aren't going to get, So I was like, okay, I was warned, I was mentally prepared for it, and it didn't bother me like it probably would have if you had. So thank you, Dozer.
Yes, you're welcome.
Um,
Like
but I was just,
I keep wanting to rewatch it, but I just almost like can't make myself do it because I just know how much country music there is. Because the rest, like everything else about the movie is really good. It's like, why did you have
Yeah.
to do that?
Yeah. It
Yeah.
wasn't as in your face as I thought it was going to be. So that's, I think you had over warned me, which actually helped.
Well,
So,
and that's
but
because my level of hatred for country music is very, very, very strong. So
yeah, mine is up there, but probably not as much as yours. Like, but past that point, I think this is one of those movies that anybody could watch. It's actually a very clean movie.
it
We
is.
were a little surprised by that.
Yeah.
But it's a great piece. I mean, great continuation sequel from the first one, which is a great movie. The one piece I don't know, and I don't know if you can answer this for me. They start the movie out with the Dorothy containers for their little things, but
Mm.
I never heard them talk about the connection with anybody in the first movie. Like, how did they get those? Do you remember them
Ooh.
explaining that? Little trivia here.
I would have to rewatch it. I felt like
Okay.
at the time there was a connection, but now it's been so long since I've seen it that I don't remember what that connection was. I feel like I
Okay.
remembered that there was one, but I cannot remember off the top of my head what it is anymore.
Okay. That bothered me, but
Yeah.
and last but not least, I've continued on like, the video editing thing that I do
Yeah.
with the Superman series and all this. I haven't really ever stopped. Like I just keep
He has not.
finding new
He
things.
has
And
not stopped.
yeah, it's just my hobby. But the last one I did is this a guilty pleasure of mine from my childhood
Mm.
that I did. And again, I've called it a guilty pleasure, so don't judge me. And I think anybody who would watch it now would not appreciate it for like when we were, kind of kids. But the 1993 Super Mario Brothers movie,
Ah.
um, yeah, I edited that, made it, in my opinion, a little better. Took out some things, put in some things from like there's a lot of deleted scenes and stuff. So like they took out some stuff that would have actually been good if they kept it in the movie. It would have made a little bit more sense. But so I did have that, and I just had to do a little shout out to that terrible movie.
Nice.
Um,
Nice.
yeah,
Very good.
I still enjoy it.
The two I'll highlight were I went to the theaters and saw Last Breath in theaters, which I actually quite enjoyed. It basically is about a diving crew that fixes undersea pipelines. And so they went out to this place in like the North Atlantic where they had to fix a gas pipeline. But one of the things I found so fascinating was how like the day-to-day operations of these divers, like they board the ship and then go immediately into compression tanks that look like little submarines. And they spend like their journey out to wherever the pipeline is, getting their body acclimatized to like however deep they have to be. So they spend like the entire voyage in these decompression and compression tanks. And so that was just kind of fascinating to see that and see how that works and the mechanisms of that. But basically, the plot line is the one guy gets like cut off from the ship, has no oxygen, and they're trying to figure out how to get him back. And
Mm.
it's based on a true story. Like this story actually happened. So it was a good human interest story and uh, kind of for me shine the light on some, like if you were ever into like the micro dirty jobs type thing, uh,
Mm.
like dangerous jobs or like the oil rig guys or something like
Yeah.
these divers fit right in with that type of danger and like those kind of difficult job crews. But it was good. It was a really good story.
Okay.
And the second one I'll highlight would have been added to my list from best movies of last year had I seen it, but I didn't really remember hearing anything about it. And it was September 5. September
Mm.
5 is a fascinating movie. It basically follows around the was it CBS whatever news crew that was covering the 72 Olympics during the time of the hostage thing where the Palestinians broke in and killed um the Israeli Olympic team, the Israeli wrestling team and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Like it basically follows the news crew along as they're trying to cover this story And as they're trying to make like the editorial decisions, as they're trying to figure out how to do it and what to do and where to go and how, like, so it basically follows that crew as they're living out this experience and figuring out what they're going to do and how they're going to cover it. Um, it's really, really interesting. My minor critique is that it's a little self-aggrandizing because like the story is not about like what happened, it's about like how the media thought about what happened. But that being said, like that's only a minor thing. Like it really was like they did a great job of engaging you in the story of how do you cover live unfolding events like this, especially in a bygone era where nothing was digital. And that was kind of the cool
Yeah.
things about it, is like how did they cover this and how did they do this stuff in an era before the digital ease. And so that part was absolutely fascinating. So it's an under talked about story and a really unique way of figuring out how to cover that and how to look into it. So it's a really good insight into it. I think it's on Paramount right now, but it's really good.
Cool.
All right, that is the show, everyone. Thank you for tuning into Film for Fans. And make sure you visit filmforfans.com, like, subscribe, tell your friends. Any parting words for us, Steve?
See ya. Nope. That's all I got.
All right, enjoy the movies.